This Fed Gov Today program sponsored by Commvault and Carasoft. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, don't use AI to solve just any old problem. You too can leverage the data resilience advantage and solving the quantum equation for the federal government. Welcome to Fed Gov Today in Washington, D.C., on YouTube and around the world on the American Forces Network. I'm Francis Rose. The federal government's new artificial intelligence use case inventories due any day now. Last year's inventory included more than 1,700 examples. One federal chief information officer's warning, though, don't use AI to solve every problem. That CIO is Carter Farmer. He's CIO at the Environmental Protection Agency. Carter, welcome. Thanks for joining me. You said recently they just jump in there without asking the right questions first. Many times the solution or the problem you're trying to solve doesn't need AI. What are the right questions to ask about AI, and how are you doing that at your agency? How are you vetting what's an AI solution and what doesn't need to be?
Well, I think you got to step back a step from there and say, how are we actually solving problems? You know, when you go to solve an actual puzzle, you don't look, you don't have a box to look at the picture. You don't just go in there and say, I think the puzzle is this, therefore I'm going to build it this way, right? You have to figure out there's patterns, match the colors, and put those pieces together. So really it's just taking a step back and figuring out, what are we trying to solve? What are the data involved? How does this process work? And imagine that and go through that process to see what tools you need. AI is just a tool in the tool belt. You wouldn't fix a pipe leak with a hammer, right? You would use a pipe wrench. Right, so you don't. If you find the right tool to solve the problem, then it's going to work 100% every time. So it's really about going through that process to figure out, how do I approach this problem? What are the end results I need to solve for, and what's the data involved, and how do I incorporate the best tool possible to make this a reality?
And it sounds to me, I'm just guessing, but of those three elements that you just laid out, what's the end result that I'm trying to get to? Maybe the most important one. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think a lot of times we'll know what the end result we want is in mind, and we'll use it, try to match it to a technology. Mm-hmm. And that's really the opposite way of how you solve a problem. Like, you don't go to a math problem and say, here's the answer, I want to work backwards to figure out how I got to it, right? So
yeah. How are you trying to incorporate that line of thinking into what you're doing consolidation-wise at EPA?
So number one, our team is really approaching all IT projects from a data-first mentality. So they're looking at the data, seeing how it interacts. We have numerous systems that interact with each other. And those systems can work from the Office of Air and Radiation to Office of Water, Office of Land Management, things of that nature. And they all come together and have to work together. So looking at the data and seeing how they actually come together, how they coalesce, and how we actually make all those things actually come to a point where they actually work together, instead of saying, I'm going to make this disparate system, this bespoke product that doesn't work with these things over here, and then we have to figure out how to fix that on the back end, right? Mm-hmm. Another part is, we've always been kind of a not just EPA issue, but a government-wide issue. It's always been kind of decentralized from an IT standpoint. And that really goes back to how the government's funded, how funding comes into agencies, things of that nature. Obviously, agencies were around before IT. So trying to actually centralize some of those services and find efficiencies, actually have everybody paddling in the same direction when it comes to solving a problem, I think is very important as well.
How does the data-first mentality inform the way that you're restructuring either where the boxes are inside the organization from an IT perspective, or how one organization talks to another, or the infrastructure that's required to support that, and so on?
So right now we are focusing on really walking hand in hand with the different offices who are building, modernizing their systems or building new systems, and making sure we have a centralized approach on how we're actually approaching the certain data elements and how they might interact with other systems across the agency, and pulling those stakeholders in to make sure they're involved in the process as well. And we're thinking 10 steps down the road, not just immediately what's in front of us. So that's step number one. I think moving forward, we will slowly actually have to pull those pieces together from a more centralized organizational standpoint. But it's really a process, and it takes time, and changing things overnight actually would create more chaos than it would actually fix problems. So we're really trying to do this in a thoughtful way that actually brings real value to not only the EPA and our mission, but the taxpayer as well.
You used the puzzle analogy earlier, which I think is fascinating as an organization is trying to rethink its infrastructure and the way that it delivers IT services to its internal stakeholders, your colleagues in the agency, and then to the external stakeholders too. That's particularly complex, I imagine, for EPA because you interact with so many nonprofits, so many organizations in academia, and the national labs and so on.
Yes, and it's if you look at EPA and our mission, we are very much a data-driven organization. We are collecting data across the board from numerous different inputs, and we're then looking at that data, taking action on that data, and reporting out on that data. So at the end of the day, we are data collectors and data aggregators and data people that are actually monitoring the data to see what we need to do with it. So our focus is really 100% on how do we pull that in a thoughtful way? How does it work together? How do we design systems that actually integrate that? And really, AI runs on a data layer, right? So if your data isn't good, then AI is only as good as how the data actually is underneath it. So working really hard to make sure that our data is sanitized, it's actually unified in a way that actually makes sense from different parts of the organization. So you might have a definition for something in Office of Land and Emergency Management from Office of Water, two same data points, but call something completely different. So trying to actually coalesce those things so that AI can understand our data and actually put that AI layer on top of it to provide those huge efficiencies and things of that nature. Do
you have an end state in mind, or is that kind of an obsolete term in information technology now, given the way that new technologies come about, the way that existing technologies evolve and so on?
I think I would get way too far out ahead of my skis if I was trying to think of the end state while in the middle of, it's like trying to change the engine on a plane while it's still in the air, right? That always is a moving target. And I think what we try to do is optimize with the tools we have in our tool belt right now, and then look down the road and see what's on the horizon. How can we incorporate that? How can we make sure we're building things that are ready for those new technologies that are coming, like agentic AI and things of that nature? We're moving in that direction right now. So it's really about doing all the groundwork to prepare ourselves so we aren't stuck in one specific direction and have to backtrack and then move back and redesign again.
Do you have mileposts then that are in mind where you say in 6 months we want to be here, a year we want to be here, or things like that? Or are you just kind of grinding through the process of improving things on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis?
It really depends on the problem we're talking about, right? There's certain things we're working on at EPA that we definitely have strict timelines around, and that I think we're working very diligently towards, and in meeting very short timetables that might have been 4 or 5 years before, we're doing in a year now.
Yeah.
So there's things like that, big modernization projects. There's other things where we're not time boxing it, right? We're saying, okay, let's look for significant improvement. How much are we raising the bar? How much are we actually changing and improving the process? Which is sometimes a better indicator of you're going the right direction than actually hitting what we call a finished product.
What are some of the big building blocks that you want to hit that you mentioned a moment ago?
So one of those is definitely the centralization piece, right? We want to fix that. The other is we've actually in our reorganization have really changed how we view IT. It used to be in the office of the OCIO, everything was basically kind of a waterfall kind of mentality of your security, your operations, your data team, and they'll do their part and throw over the fence to the other team. Now we're working in a more modern way where we actually have what we're calling fusion teams, or we might call it an agile tiger team, where the teams are actually all coming together at once from cradle to grave and working through projects, whether it's a short-term project, long-term project, to actually bring everybody to the table day one so we can have all that information up front, built up in a very efficient way so we aren't getting 6 months down the road and saying, oh no, we forgot this piece. Oh no, we didn't think about that. We want to have all those discussions at the very beginning of the project, and those people will live with that product until it's all the way to the decom.
Carter, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
You can read more about Carter's work at EPA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, you too can leverage the data resilience advantage. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Innovation doesn't wait, and neither do we. At Maximus, we solve problems, streamlining operations, delivering solutions at speed and scale that drive measurable results. From strategy to execution, we simplify complexity, building trust through expertise and innovative technology. Every service, every time. Efficient government delivered. We don't follow innovation, we drive it. Maximus.
Welcome back. Federal agencies say data is more important than ever. That means the resilience of that data is moving up their risk management charts. Richard Breakiron, Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives for U.S. Public Sector at Commvault. Richard, welcome. Thanks for joining me. You spoke recently about data resilience. What does that term mean to a federal data professional, and who else should care about data resilience inside their organizations?
Well, thank you first. Cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to be here. And data resilience is everywhere, in my opinion, and it applies to the entire organization. And I'll take Lieutenant General Jeff Ray's Army G6 comments the other day. His comment is, the Army doesn't have a data problem, they have a data management problem. And that's what data resilience is all about. There's a unity of data that is now becoming very, very apparent. AI is actually driving a lot of this as well. You've got data everywhere, but not a drop to drink in the way of many things. So what I think we, in particular in industry, and particularly in Commvault and in Carahsoft and supporting their partnerships, is we're trying to say everybody has data on-prem. They have some in the cloud. They have some in their own cloud regional centers or their intranets. And the goal is, wouldn't it be nice to have a management system that you can overlay on all of this? Data resilience is not only about knowing where your data is, first critical step, knowing the quality of your data. I know a couple of your speakers have spoken to this before, but also when the terrible happens, either by accident or by an adversarial attack, that you have the ability to get back up and running your critical systems. Get your critical systems back up and running, be it your Active Directory instantiations or any of your immediacy of doing business, doing mission accomplishment. That's what data resilience is about. It's really having that control holistically in a unified way.
Folks in our community frame ideas oftentimes around people, process, technology. You've done the same with this concept, particularly though about technology. You write, technology is the foundation for modernization regarding data resilience. What's the connection among those two things? You heard Carter just a few moments ago talking about what he's doing for modernization, consolidation, making EPA a data-centric organization.
So for me, I always look at that framework. And to me, technology is that augment to both the people and the process, because right now data is occurring at such a rapid rate, it's such a volume of data, and it's such a variety. You've got drones getting information everywhere on the federal side. You've got interfaces with public, like Carter mentioned with EPA. You've got private organizations that need access to EPA data is a good example. But what you are able to do with technology is start to put an overlay, put an architecture in place that allows people to integrate and use their ways of wanting to interface. So notice that I think technology from the very get-go of the first computers have always been about you and I talk like we are talking right now and engaging. That's how I want to deal with a computer. I want to have a normal conversation. And so that's a technical issue. I want to be able to let people be able to have that automated sense. So when I look at the AI that Commvault integrates, we have a dashboard. We can now see data all the way from the on-premise to the cloud. It's a unified picture. But now wouldn't it just be nice to say, hey, can you tell me how our backups did last month? Can you tell me which data is at risk? Hey, can you tell me what data did Richard Breakiron talk to yesterday, last month? How's he look from a profile? Is he an insider threat? So these are the ways that I envision and where I see industry is taking us, and where our technology certainly is taking us to enhance the individual and to enhance the process. Zero trust architecture, another good example of that. So our CEO, when we achieved our FedRAMP high and we started, a lot of people came to us and said, oh, this is compliance and ball and chain. And he put the spin on it saying, no, it's not. Here's a strategic advantage. So in the same way Carter mentioned about these unified teams, people, process, and technology has to be unified. You have to see that compliance controls are really just about business processes. And if you work security at the same time you're building the technical solution of using Google Maps or using whatever technology that you see, you all of a sudden realize, oh, this can be an integrated picture, and I can interface with technology in a way that really meets a lot of objectives that everybody's trying to achieve.
Richard, it's always great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me again.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Francis. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I know Carasoft, I appreciate their sponsorship as well.
You can read more about data resilience on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, solving the quantum equation for the federal government. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back.
One of the things that I always hear from my family members is, why do I have so many different portals? And why do I have to log into all of these different places to get information that should be more easily accessible? And one of the ways that we can do that is by making sure that standards are the foundation of all of the systems that hospitals are using and providers are using and that we're using when we log in to access our own information.
Why is it that I can put a concert ticket in my virtual wallet, but I can't put my health insurance card in many cases? So how do we create ecosystems that sit with and alongside standards, but that even are implemented voluntarily through kind of initiatives that provide a space to develop those shared ways of working and kind of ways of collaborating?
Welcome back. Customs and Border Protection's ready to take the next step in its post-quantum cryptography journey. CBP's been working on quantum computing issues for several years now. Ed Mays is Deputy Assistant Commissioner of Infrastructure and Support Services for the Office of Information and Technology at CBP. Ed, welcome. It's great to see you again. What is your post-quantum cryptography journey, and why is quantum so important to CBP?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. And I think that quantum computing and post-quantum cryptography are important because the world is changing around us. And I think sometimes we get caught by surprise because we're not prepared. I look at the leadership and guidance that we're receiving from the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and I think it's driving us to the solutions that we need for our nation. It's really important because we need to be the most ready when the nation is the least ready, right? The American people are depending on us to provide solutions and to defend our country, right? Whether that's a border solution or an economic solution, but the American people are depending on us to be thinking ahead. We have adversaries that are out there that have fewer rules, and they're making great progress, so we need to be ready. So why do I say that? When you look at things, all of our technology, whether it's your mobile device, your watch, satellites, your microwave oven, everything has cryptography or ciphers built into them, right? And most of them are what's called elliptic curve algorithms, which means they're highly factorable. Quantum computers, when they become powerful enough, right, they will be able to slice through that encryption like a hot knife through butter. And that's coming from a Marine, right, a retired Marine. And I think it's important to know that because we get so, we think we're safe. And if no one's doing anything, you find yourself in a really tough situation later on, trying to catch up and trying to repair things. So we're very proactive over at CBP. We look at the mission sets that we have. We look at the adversaries that are out there, and we know they're making great progress. So how do we defend ourselves against that? When you look at programs that are in CBP like the automated commercial environment, the automated commercial environment, or ACE, is really the lifeblood. It tracks everything coming into our economy, whether it's via an airport, a seaport, via rail, whatever it is, right? All that trade is coming in via ACE. How do we protect ACE for the future? One of those things that we're going to have to do is implement PQC so that we can stop the adversaries from harming our country and impacting our economy, impacting our border, and the livelihoods of all Americans.
Where would you say you are on this post-quantum cryptography journey? Easy for me to say. And where would you like to go on that journey, Ed?
So I'd say that we've worked with NIST and others. Probably about 2 years ago, we did one of the first proofs of concept in government with PQC, and I think it was highly successful. We learned a lot. I mean, I'm a doctor of IT, and I thought I knew a lot about quantum. Turned out that I was wrong, and we learned a lot more about processing times and what it's going to require from a compute perspective, and where all the cryptography is laced throughout our systems. It's everywhere. So it's not just as simple as one would think, right? And that impacts how systems are built. So where are we now? We did the PQC, POC, and then we moved now to, we're going to do hopefully this year, we're going to envelop one of our high value assets, which is an application, and we're going to try and get that done by this calendar year, right? So we're going to put a PQC related wrapper around this, right? And if that's successful, we'll learn a lot from it. And then we'll look at the rest of the technology stack, from the hardware to the operating system and so on. But it is not as simple as most people would assume. We'll just replace the ciphers or cryptography that's already there, because we don't know all the new interactions and the processing time or the compute required. So it's a great journey to be on, but I think that what we do, the outcomes that'll be achieved, will lead us to making our country safer.
There's still a lot of questions about when quantum will be, I'm using air quotes, ready, when it will be a factor for adversaries to use, for good guys like yourself to use to defend United States assets. How does one strategize in that kind of an environment where you're not sure when the threat is coming and you're not necessarily sure what form the threat will take, how powerful it will be, and so on?
Well, I think the big strategy is this: knowing that something will happen, right? You may not necessarily know when, but we do know that we have a capability that if we get it in place, will make it much harder for quantum computers to actually break into our networks and break through firewalls, et cetera, right? So that is the goal. So we know that we can slow it down or stop it, right? To some degree. So with that knowledge, now you do that, what's my risk level, right? We in the modern world, we don't have the time that we had to respond to things like in the past. I know you had someone earlier talking about AI, we talk about cyber defense. The challenges against our networks now are much greater than they used to be. I mean, if you look at CBP, we're like 100 million attacks or attempts against our network a day. So what was that like 10 years ago? Almost nil. So as quantum computers continue to develop, and they are out there, right? If we're ready, then we have a chance. If we're not, then it's going to be very, very interesting for us as a nation.
One of the rhetorical questions you mentioned a moment ago, Ed, what's my risk level? How has the risk management calculus changed as you've learned more about quantum and you've seen some of these, you said these computers are out there, as you've started to see that, how has that changed the way that you think about the risk associated?
Well, I will tell you, a couple of years ago, I was visiting, I won't name the vendor, but I was visiting a vendor that's working on quantum computing, and I quickly realized after about a couple of hours of watching and touching, and looking at quantum development, and I quickly realized that if we don't do something now, and I think at DHS at the time, the leadership, right, and continuing today, right, what are we going to do if this occurs, right? So my risk calculus and probably my blood pressure probably went up a little bit because, what do we have in place? And the answer at that time was literally nothing. I think we are a lot more aware now, and we've started, especially with OMB coming out saying, go out and really look at your networks, look at your software, and catalog what you have in terms of ciphers that need to be replaced or encryption that needs to be replaced. So we've done a lot of that prep work. And again, that was much more than I thought it was going to be. Right? Initially, I thought it was going to be an easy sort of approach, but it's a complex problem. But now that we know what we have, I think that we're going to be able to put some things in place that will, slow things down if there's going to be a quantum attack in the future, an attack by a quantum computer.
Ed, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
You can read more about CBP's quantum journey on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in just a moment. A sense of urgency is mounting for the Department of Defense to achieve a clean audit opinion by 2028. KPMG has a proven, scalable blueprint able to deliver clean audit opinions in the DoD. They don't let perfect become the enemy of the good. They design practical, effective, reliable solutions that put the mission and warfighters first. They start with a recognition of reality instead of utopian controls. That demonstrates accountability and ensures resource availability for the warfighter. KPMG takes advantage of every tool at its disposal. Its technology accelerators pave the way for artificial intelligence and machine learning. They're not afraid to be honest or ruthless. They'll identify and stop underperforming legacy technology. They know multitasking's required, and they're optimized for it. That ultimately supports the warfighter and strengthens national security. Together, KPMG can help you achieve and sustain a clean audit by 2028. Go ahead, get started. Welcome back. In today's Event Spotlight, you can learn more about the future of acquisition Tuesday, January 27th, when ACT-IAC hosts Uncharted Territory, a revolutionary approach to acquisition. It's happening at the Carasoft Conference and Collaboration Center in Reston. You'll see speakers from OMB, the Pentagon, USDA, and more. You can read more about it and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 OPM. Director Scott Cooper's back to tell you more about the government-wide HR system consolidation OPM's leading. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching and have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the Fed Gov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.